it's, in other words, it's serving. I mean, every job serves in where you can, get some skill sets
Right.
of being a better communicator, a better leader, all of that good stuff, or even helping with discipline and structure. But I see what you're saying, something that's going to serve what it is that you're going to do later on.
Right. And I always say it's not necessarily, I tell teens, imagine yourself at your old, like me, I'm mid 40s. Okay. Imagine yourself, you're old.
You're just a child.
Yeah, I feel so good. What that education post high school does, it allows you flexibility. So yes, you can go straight to workforce, but how much flexibility will you have? I think of, and again, construction's we need it. It's essential. But when we're 40, 50 years old, do we have movement? Can we leave construction if it's on our bodies? We may have to stop working early. Can we shift in that profession? And you can still do construction, and you can get a construction management degree. That's a certificate. And it gives you the flexibility to move with the job market. So you're not in your mid 40s, 50s, and all of a sudden you can't move with the job market. I don't want anyone to feel stuck in their adult life.
Where you become unemployable. There, of course, there's two types of unemployable, where you're making millions so no one can employ you. Yes, we get that. But then there's the other, and that's the word, the flexibility and having those options, so that if you do need to make a shift or pivot, and I'm sure a lot of us are figuring that out now in this world of employability, because a lot of jobs disappeared. But how did you pivot? How did you use your certificate or your degree or your skill set? And then they have to be degree, like you mentioned. But how did you use it? And I'm sure this has been a very learning time for many of us, for a lot of us, in regards to how valuable our skill sets were.
Definitely.
And so any time to learn, especially I would say, to the next generation, is to look at our generation, your generation and mine, because I'm a little older than you are, but to look at out and see, okay, which one was more essential. And no matter what type of situation happens, a doctor will always be needed. A nursing will always be needed. Working in certain different type of fields, construction will always be needed. Like certain things, like no matter what happens, they're essential.
Right.
Essential to our economy, essential to our communities and society. So it's interesting. This is the best time to learn, to see if what I love to do is, like, if I don't want to be a doctor, I don't need, that's not a place to go for me, but maybe I want to be a teacher.
Yes.
And so his teachers are essential also. So it gives you an idea. This gives you an idea of especially by the time that a parent is reaching out to you, hopefully that helps them. So it makes your job a little easier to help navigate the next generation to the right path. And so, yes. And so when you're working with a student, do you find that it's a lot of time that where you're the one directing the conversation, or the student has a lot of questions so that they can find out more about themselves? So, like, how's the dialogue? It's like, are you trying to, like, pull a lot out of them, or they're literally ready to come and talk to you and say, oh, I'm so glad that I'm talking to you, Sonja, or I'm sure there's a lot of them are saying, Miss Sonja, and now I can get that clarity that I was always looking for. I just didn't know how to ask somebody.
And I think, this is where it's magical, because, I want to model the parenting style that I hope everyone can start to practice. And most teens don't know what to ask. There's a lot of confusion, but they've never been asked to release that confusion. And the way that my dialogue happens, it will never be a director directing authoritative conversation. It's planting reflective questions and holding still. This is so magical. Holding still. The pause, the silence, that is powerful tools, because when I ask a hard question to a teen and saying, gosh, I see this theme of art. What is your relationship with art? How do you identify with it? And those are, even as an adult, if you ask me something, I'd be like, I need a second for that one. And I stay there with them in that silence because I know I won't let that question go. I want to give them permission to think and then to respond. And it's a beautiful thing to allow them in their space and then to practice rehearsing. It may not be beautiful response right away, right? But it gives them the permission to say, I can think whatever I'm thinking about my relationship with art. Or
I
actually,
love
I
it.
don't like art at all. My parents made me do art. And it might be
Exactly.
or band or trumpet, right? As parents and educators, it's please be more silent and still. Take the pause for your teen to take some time to really
Yes.
grapple with some tougher questions. And there's no way we can do college admissions where I'm pushing or pulling them. And many
Mm.
parents feel like that, forcing them into the gates like a stubborn horse. And then once they get through the gates, you're like, oh, good luck, right?
Yeah. It
Well,
doesn't work.
the stubborn horse is still a stubborn horse. So like, what do I do here? How do I navigate here? And so, yeah, I model the reflective nature of it's a kind of like a life coach, though I'm not a certified life coach, but I coach them through these tougher questions.
But you have, I mean, it's not even about being a certified. It's the fact that you have this experience
Mhm.
that you need to share with the parents. Because I'm sure a lot of parents you literally, I mean, it's to me, that's life changing because how many times, and I'm saying this as a coach myself, that I've met someone, and I think I would say the oldest one that I've worked with might have been like 63 years old, 62, 63. I know in the mid 60s, but what was happening is the person was so upset with themselves in their 60s
Mm.
because they went into the medical field and they didn't like it. And they're realizing in their 60s that they really chose that career because the family was encouraging. And I say encouraging
Yes, I know what
because
that means.
most of the family was in the medical field. And so you're saving possibly 40 years of headache,
Mm.
40, 30, 50 years of someone having to say, from 16 to 66, it's like, gosh, that's 50 years of your life that you could have been doing something you really love. And by meeting with Miss Sonia, you helped guide them and give them a better trajectory to something that it's almost like a fork in the road to take the right road versus a road that's been forced upon you. So
Mm.
it's crucial how you end up changing lives, from these sessions and be able to take out, bring up what it is that that person or that child or that student is really puts them on fire, really inspires them. And this is how you stay inspired when you're doing something you love. Well,
Yep.
hence, your inspired journey, right? But you're inspired to do what you're doing for 20 plus years because this means something to you. This is, as I mentioned, part of your calling. This is a ministry to you. This is how you're not only doing it to make a living, but to make a difference. And
Yep.
so it really is helpful. I mean, you're literally changing lives,
Thank you
literally.
so much. I really appreciate that. And then the selfish part of me is like, wait a minute, this generation, when I get old, they're going to be taking care of me. What are they going to invent to make my life easier, when I'm an
Yes,
elder? And I become their greatest fan, and I celebrate that what you're going to innovate will directly come back to me. And I just
yes,
can't wait to watch that unfold. I remember in a previous episode, you talk about seeds that we plant. And I do feel
yes,
like I'm just planting the seed now, and I just can't wait to see what it grows into. It's just
yes,
truly, it is
definitely.
inspirational.
And it's so beautiful what it, I mean, you're doing noble work here because I don't know, a lot of people realize it as human beings. The most fundamental, foundational aspect of existence is to be able to take on all this knowledge that we know and take it and carry it on to the next generation. This is how we get the Star Treks and get the, you know what I mean, to be able to have the NASA and build and go into the Mars and taking this information and passing it down to the next generation. And what you're helping to find the next Elon, the next Tesla owner. You're helping to find the next Yahoo. And why? Because if I love computers and I was forced into accounting, what a shame that was for the world, because this child could have really done something for the good of humanity if they really did something that was to their heart and to their imagination. So our job as the older generation is to really help support them. And this is what you're doing, and helping other families getting that aha, that how important that is. And that starts with being part of, getting that type of education. Because if you're going to be a professor or a scientist or get your PhD in physics, you can't get that if you're being forced into, and I have nothing against accounting. I love my accountants. But you know what I mean? It's like if you're forcing me to take cooking classes and I hate cooking, when in reality, as a girl, I may want to be in science, you might have done the world as a family a disservice.
Yeah.
And so here you'll come and you're helping gracefully, I may add, to help support the family to literally not only make a decision that impacts the student, the family, but possibly humanity. And so your calling is actually something that literally is connected to our future, literally.
I hope so.
And oh, I mean, as you mentioned, there's so many of our young generation who have no clue what it is that they want to do. And here you are, you're able to help guide them, coach them, mentor them, and even train them to be able to be successful in who they want to be and who they ought to be versus what the world says they should be. And that is huge.
That's
huge.
That's it right there. And I just have to say too, just one thing, because you will get those teens, and I have one. So my teen, she wasn't a high achieving, go getter, competitive. She was a very laid back, like, I don't know if school's that important, and definitely I learned so much as a parent, and even though I was the expert in college counseling, to grow with her. But when my daughter was like, I'm going to be an actress. I want to be an actress. And I just looked at her, because I said, I want you to be the best actress that the world has ever seen. So tell me about your plan. Let's build a plan. So another mom said, oh, my son said he wants to be, an extreme famous mountain biker. And I said, oh my gosh, what a waste of time. And I said, go with it, because he's passionate. You say, you're going to be the best mountain biker that this world has ever seen. Now think about what steps are next. And so when I help my daughter with acting, well, here are the steps that you have to consider. And we, worked together, and I had her do her own thing to reflect. It was her own decision to say, you know what? Acting is a hobby. I enjoy it, but I know it's not my profession. I didn't have to tell her that. She decided that was something that it was a joy, but it wasn't her life calling. And I think as parents, we shouldn't make those decisions for them, but we can help guide them to make sure you're asking the right questions when you're thinking about a certain path. So.
And you know what I've seen too, because I've worked with parents in the past, is how sometimes they share the resentment that they have for their parents for quote unquote encouraging, not forcing, but encouraging them to go a certain path that they didn't want to. Or not necessarily they were forcing them or encouraging them to a path. Because sometimes as parents, we would ask a student, we would ask our children, what is it that you want to do? And they don't have a clue. And so we would say sometimes the easiest answer or the most comfortable answer to say, well, take accounting. And I'm sorry that I keep picking on my accountants, but I'm just saying, it's like, they may tell them a guidance, and usually for a child is to please parents. A lot of times that's what our children do for us. So if a parent is saying, hey, pick this profession, usually the child say, okay, especially if they have no clue what it is that they want to do. So it's important that we need to invest more in helping our next generation figuring out earlier, right, sooner than later, of exactly what it is that they want to do. And here you literally have an organization that helps support that, to help our next generation. And again, as I mentioned, our existence is to help the next generation, because if we do them well, when we're on our sick bed, they'll turn back and give us the favor of love, nurture, and compassion versus resentment. And really, sometimes I've seen hatred, because, I could have done this, but you kept telling me to do this. And you see a lot of families fall apart because of that. So Thank you so much for sharing all these things that our listeners can actually reflect upon, and maybe even if they're not in the same phase for their children, but possibly to help their grandchildren or the neighbor. Maybe they'll take this information and share it with someone they love in their unit, in their circle. And
That's really
so I
good.
appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me on. What a great conversation.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask you, and in conclusion, how do you serve others?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm also a youth soccer coach, so um, it's hard, all heart. It's showing, how what does a compassion feel like when you receive it? What does it feel like when you give it? And so when I do a lot of service, and it's usually with youth, but it is through my core kind of superpower of compassion, not only to say I'm here to help, but to uplift and elevate.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you
Carla.
for being you and doing what it is that you do.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Sonia. Thank you, all our listeners and our audience here at Your Inspired Journey. I'm Carla Andrews. And again, we are here for one reason. We're on earth to help the next generation. You don't believe me? Look at every species on the planet, whether it's an elephant, a tiger, their whole existence is to help the next generation survive. And how do we do that? Depends on how we invest our time with our next generation, whether it's your child, your neighbor, or someone that you're working with in the school settings. So I appreciate that Sonia came by, shared with us the importance of our impact that we have on the next and our future. Until then, I look forward to seeing you soon.